Okay, so I guess we'll get started
Hello.
and we'll have
Hello.
everyone else join as they come. I'm Amanda Malakoski. I'm a psychologist at Memorial. I work with Dr. Bill Breitbart. I'm also the early career director of IPOS, and I'm a co-chair with Tiana. I don't know quite where she is for the early career professionals in psycho-oncology. So we have a bunch of committee members here. We are so excited to have such a great turnout today. And essentially, we just want this to be a really comfortable conversation about, things we might face as early career professionals and so on. I'm going to introduce our three speakers and get the ball rolling. So this is in alphabetical order. So first we have Dr. William or Bill Breitbart. He's a chairman and attending psychiatrist here at MSK. He's the recipient of the IPOS 2009 Sutherland Lifetime Achievement Award and the 2019 Jimmy Holland Award for lifetime contributions to psychiatric oncology. He also most recently was awarded the 2023 Lifetime Achievement Award for outstanding contributions to palliative care from MD Anderson. He served as the president emeritus of IPOS, and his research efforts have focused really on psychiatric aspects of cancer care and palliative care. He does a lot of work. His most recent efforts have been in meaning-centered psychotherapy, and he has a lot of funding through the NIH. He has over 500 peer review publications, chapters and review papers, 13 textbooks, and numerous meaning-centered psychotherapy treatment manuals. And he is the editor-in-chief of Cambridge University Press's International Palliative Care Journal entitled Palliative and Supportive Care. Thank you for joining us, Bill.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
All right, so next we have Dr. Linda Carlson. Thank you so much for joining us. She has held the Enbridge Research Chair in Psychosocial Oncology since 2007. She's a full professor of psychosocial oncology in the Department of Oncology at the Cummings School of Medicine at the University of Calgary and an adjunct professor in the Department of Psychology. She's the director of the Alberta Complementary Therapy and Integrative Oncology Center, and is the director of research and continues to work as the clinical psychologist at the Department of Psychosocial Resources at Cancer Care Alberta, where she has provided clinical services since 1997. She's received a long line of national and international research and teaching awards throughout her career, and her research in psychosocial oncology, integrative oncology, and mindfulness-based cancer recovery has been published in many high-impact journals and book chapters. She was the president of the Society for Integrative Oncology from 2021 to 2023, and is the co-editor-in-chief for our official IPOS journal, the Journal of Psychosocial Oncology Research and Practice. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. It's a mouthful introducing all of you. It's amazing how much you've accomplished. We're really lucky to have you. And last but not least, we have Dr. Chaba Dégi. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. So he is a distinguished professor and researcher at, please help me pronounce this one correctly. Yeah. Yes, University's Faculty of Sociology and Social Work in Romania, and he's the president of the European Cancer Organization and executive secretary of IPOS. He's a leading authority in psychosocial oncology. He holds degrees in social work and a PhD in medical psychology and serves as the university's first ombuds. He pioneered the APSCO research project and developed innovative cancer distress screening technology. He's named the Romanian Ministry of Health's Committee for Social Work and Support in Oncology. His expertise has been featured in prominent publications, including Cancer Letter, Cancer World, and Politico. Dr. Dégi currently coordinates the biomedical ethics and social medical section at UBB Med, and he also maintains a private practice. So we are really fortunate to have you all joining. For those of you, again, who are comfortable having your camera on, by all means, we love to see faces and want this to be a comfortable conversation. So our goal is to kind of get through 3 questions, and then we want to make sure that there's time for everyone to ask their own questions. We really, are super lucky. So we've got the full hour. And our first question, and I'll post this in the chat, is what has inspired you to pursue a career in this field? And what's been the most rewarding part of your journey? Now, when we get to the question portion, if whoever's asking the question, I can remind us later, if you want to jump on, introduce yourself, say where you're coming from. But I will post our first question in the chat. I can volunteer someone or
I wasn't sure if you wanted us to go in the same order.
totally up to you guys.
No, ladies first.
Well, I was thinking we could start with the most senior person. And Bill, with that line of accolades, I mean, you've got all the lifetime achievement awards, so there's nothing left to do now but retire, right?
Yes, and also what it
Or
means
maybe
is
you'll
that
be like Jimmy.
maybe I think being the oldest here, except for maybe Harvey Chachnoff, might be a little older than me. But
No.
no,
No.
not in a hurry.
There is a big no, yes.
Yeah. Oh, confirm is speaking language. Anyway.
Oh, that's for closed captions. Okay, so the question was what inspired you, and I think often when we reconstruct our career paths, we make a much more cohesive story than it actually was at the time.
Yeah.
And certainly for me, I didn't go into grad school thinking I was going to study psycho-oncology. I went into grad school, I did my PhD at McGill University in clinical psychology, and I was studying sort of psychoneuroendocrinology. So I was looking at associations between hormones and cognitive function, estrogen replacement, that kind of stuff. So it was within health psychology, but not in oncology. And it was only when I did my internship, my pre-doctoral internship year, that I came back to Calgary, which is where I was from initially. And one of my rotations, I chose the Cancer Center because it was one of the available options. I said, well, that might be interesting. And really, it was the people that I met there and the environment and the encouragement of research and the opportunity to study things I was very passionate about, which was looking at screening for distress in people with cancer and really developing a program in complementary therapies and mindfulness-based interventions. So I'd been a practicing meditator and doing yoga myself on the side for quite some time, and finding this opportunity to bring together my personal interests with my professional interest. And I found working with people who were going through cancer was just so rewarding because they were really in a position where they wanted to look at their lives in a deep and profound way and often make changes, and were much more dedicated to those kind of intervention programs that we were developing. And we really saw, amazing progress and just the way that people engaged with the mindfulness meditation, the interventions we were developing. And so I really enjoyed working with the population. And then I just had lots of opportunity to be a postdoc there and just sort of get funding. And, every step of the way, things sort of just fall into place. And I think that's often what happens when you're doing something that you're really, really passionate about. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much.
Saba, please go next.
Thank you so very much, Bill. I will try to keep it short. If my English is more broken than usual, I am very sorry. It's at the end of the day, I am quite tired, but very happy to be here with you. The question is, what inspired me to come to Psycho-Oncology? I have very, very many different answers to that, but I think the short and most relevant ones are the three that I'm going to share with you. The first one is a personal inspiration. When my father was 49, he died of lung cancer. I was a teenager boy, and we did not have a good relationship. And after he died, I really wanted to understand what this man was going through. And it was a sort of drama and trauma of my life, and a 9-year-long grief. And it turned out to be one of my greatest inspiration, because I was preparing myself to be a priest. And that's really changed the pathway. And what I did was that I went to the hospitals. I was outside of the system, and during the afternoons, where usually there's no one there with the patients, and in the weekends, I was sitting with the patients and talking with the patients. And I discovered how much I feel at home, and at the same time, how much I understand about the suffering of cancer patient. Of course, always with my father on my mind. And I did discover that it was back in 1999 when I did this. And then I really wanted to do more about it. And being in an academic background, of course, it turned out to be that doing research, it's a really nice idea. No one wanted that. Back then in Romania, they thought that psycho-oncology is a kind of horoscope thing, or some witchcraft or some voodoo. But nevertheless, I was turned down, and not a psychologist, not a sociologist. Nobody wanted to have, someone like me, a young person with a very high personal motivation and with a lot of work in the hospital with the patients. No one wanted that. So I needed to go to another country, to Hungary, to Budapest, and try at a medical university. And they welcomed me. I was a stranger, but they did understand what I was looking forward and looking to do. And all these afternoons with the patients and my journey of understanding my father actually got me into a place where I started doing research. And speeding it a little bit up, I discovered that the values and experiences that we see and feel with our patients and the people who are affected by cancer are my bubble. They are my world, because very simply speaking, what I like, and this is always an inspiration for me, what I like in this very complicated and sometimes very hard field of psychosocial oncology is that people really want to do their best. I love to see people when they do their best. And I think that's a very core experience. And I think the most important change after I had my PhD was IPOS. And I really mean that. I was looking for a place to belong. I was looking to be in a professional family. And I think the greatest inspiration, and I will stop, is what it was that I discovered through IPOS and through many wonderful people at IPOS. I discovered that I am not alone anymore. I think some of you, or maybe many of you, living in different parts of the world, being young and trying to find your place in the psychosocial journey, you might be feeling alone and not feeling in a place where you belong. Well, for me, IPOS was this, and I have to tell you that many of the successes that came after that were actually based on the professional family and all the friendships and all the support that I got from this big family that we have. And I think the most rewarding thing, I am 45 now, the most important and most rewarding thing for me is that I don't feel like a lonely wolf in the profession. I have my own PhD student, my own research team, my own research projects, and I'm so happy to do oncopolicy. And I will stop here, but a lot of things. Thank you for your patience, Bill, and thank you for your generosity to offer this place.
Yeah, thank you, Sava. That was really very moving. Your account resonates a great deal with me. I believe for all of us, choosing a career, and particularly choosing a career in psycho-oncology, is part of the process of becoming who we are in the world, who we're meant to be. So there are several aspects of the question, what inspired you to pursue a career in psycho-oncology. I would say that my spirit inspired me to pursue psycho-oncology. And by my spirit, I mean the essence of who I am, the process that I went through of creating who I am and who I became in the world over the last 50 years since I started that process. Like Saba, everything begins at home, in the family, with your legacy and your history and the experiences of your family and childhood. And not uncommonly, these kinds of experiences, these kinds of pursuits of specific kinds of careers come out of, especially psycho-oncology, I think, comes out of trauma as well, deaths, things like that. And for me, it was a very specific inspiration. Some of you may know about this from reading essays I've written, or maybe I've talked about it at other times and you've heard it. But my parents were 14 and 17 years old when the war broke out in Europe. They were Holocaust survivors from Eastern Poland. And when they were about 14, 17, they fled into the forest and hid in the forest, part of a group of partisan fighters. It was miraculous that they survived. If I often say, if my mother or father had made a left turn one day instead of a right turn, I would not be here. And I wouldn't have this very long, very unlikely experience of living a human life. And then after the war, they were in a displaced persons camp outside of Munich called Fernwald. They were there for about 5 or 6 years. They got married there and came to New York City on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. That's where I grew up. And I grew up in one of those small classic walk-up tenement apartment buildings. With me and my younger brother, my mother and father, and I sometimes say, and the Holocaust lived with us in the same apartment. It was too big to lock up in one room, so it occupied the whole apartment, and all of the it was on all of the walls and all of the pictures and all of the religious articles that had been saved from the war and things like that. So as a 4.5-year-old, 5-year-old, death was real for me. My parents would talk about all of their experiences during the war and the hiding in the forest, all of the people who died, all the people who never had a chance to create their lives, young people. And every morning when my mother would feed me breakfast, give me and my little brother breakfast, she would ask us the same question. She'd ask us, why am I here? The full question was really, why am I here and everyone else is dead? And it soon became very clear to me that I had a particular burden in this family. My burden, which turned out to be an inspiration, my burden was to achieve something of such significance in the world, particularly in the arena of suffering, and particularly in the realm of human beings who are living in that space between life and death, where mortality is undeniable, and you can see it. You can breathe, you can see it. You can't deny it. You're proximate to it, just like they were in the woods, in the forest. And so I undertook that obligation, and that's how I ended up at Sloan Kettering, breathing the same air of cancer patients who were in that space between life and death. And I didn't know it. I didn't know that's why I ended up at Memorial Sloan Kettering. I was interested in science. I wanted to be a physician. I was interested in the arts. I was an English major with a concentration in poetry writing, and studied with a very famous Canadian poet laureate of the United States. I could, a fellow named Mark Strand. After studying with him for 3 years, I could write a Mark Strand poem better than Mark Strand. And that was why I didn't become a poet, because it's like being Picasso's student. Every painting that you paint, people go, "Is that Picasso?" And I go, "No, it's a Breitbart." But anyway, so I didn't really know it until I got to Memorial. And so what I ended up what surprised me and what was really gratifying is that when I got to Memorial, I had no intention of becoming a researcher, or I just wanted to be a good clinician. But I was driven into the field to try to understand how human beings can live a finite mortal existence. This was my main preoccupation. And I ended up initially doing research because nobody else had the answers to the questions I was asking. I was making rounds with Dr. Holland on the neuro-oncology unit. There were patients on corticosteroid medicine who were developing manias and depression. And I asked her, "Dr. Holland, Jimmy, what causes these syndromes? What is it about steroids? What kind of syndromes do they cause? What's the best treatment for it?" And she was undeniably a great mentor. And her response to me was, "Well, Bill, I really don't know. I guess you'll just have to go figure that one out yourself." So the best advice I ever got was to figure it out myself, which I wouldn't say would be the advice I'd give someone else, but it was a good advice for me.
That is our next question, Bill, but I'll have you wrap it up if that's all right.
Yeah, that's it. That's
Okay.
how I ended up at Memorial.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing so honestly and so openly. For a lot of us, I imagine there are very personal reasons as to why we ended up in this field, which leads me to my second question, which is, what advice do you have for early career psycho-oncologists and also new members of IPOS? I'm going to send this as well to the chat. And then after this, we've got one more question planned, and then really want to open up the floor for everyone else to ask questions if they have any.
Well, I'll start. I think the most important the advice I'd give younger psycho-oncologists is to be curious and to have the courage to pursue understanding what you're curious about. And the other thing is that one of the things I learned is that you don't have to be, I learned this from having had Dr. Harvey Chachnov as my first fellow the first year I was an attending. You don't have to be the smartest person in the world to have a very successful career in psycho-oncology. Dr. Chachnov and I are good examples of that. You don't have to be the smartest people in the world. You just really have to have stamina. And you can't let anyone tell you that you can't do that, or you shouldn't study that. That's not a good thing to study. I think you have to follow your own voice and that voice in your head. You have to pursue your own interests, your own dreams, and don't give up. Because it's very easy to give up. The systems of healthcare and research make it very easy to fail and give up. So I think the most important thing is don't give up. I needed to do I needed to find the answers to particular research questions. I never wrote a grant in order to get funding for my salary. I only wrote grants to studies to answer questions. And the National Cancer Institute was going to give me the money to study this question, to do this research, because I needed to find the answer to that question. So I wasn't going to stop till they gave me the money. So stamina and don't give up. It's easy to give up.
Yeah, I would echo that around persistence is recognize that you have to have a very thick skin. You know, and I often say to students, you see the CV that's got all the accolades and all the publications, but there's a shadow CV, right? Or a curriculum morte with all the stuff that didn't get funded, right? The filing cabinets full of grants that went nowhere. And, you know, so most people don't talk about that, but really, you know, success, if however you define it, is fueled by failure, however you define that. Right. So I think you have to be studying something that, yeah, you're very passionate about. Otherwise, it's hard to have that level of persistence. And I think also, though, you do need to pace yourself, right? It's a marathon, not a sprint, a career, really, in any kind of research. You know, so I'm sure there's questions about work-life balance and that kind of thing. But yeah, and curiosity, you know, I've always just been someone who has to see what's around the next corner. You know, I can't stop until I've explored the whole place, right? And so finding something that suits your personality. And I guess the last thing I would say is, you know, really find a niche where there's lots of space, lots of opportunity. You know, there are more and more people studying in this area, but there's still so many things that are unexplored. That finding that marrying your personal interests with an area that really there is a lot to learn, you know, is kind of the magic formula, I think.
Well, so I was thinking, I was just, I would just point out something that I think you were beginning to say, which is me getting involved in IPOS. I didn't have a choice. I was working with Jimmy creating IPOS. I got dragged into the room. I didn't have a choice. But IPOS became my home. And just like Sava, all of my friends in the world are primarily people who are my closest friends in the world are my colleagues from IPOS, people I've met in IPOS. I have more friends outside of the United States than inside the United States. Well, that may say something else about me, but getting involved in IPOS and networking is that's one of the most that's critically important. And
Sure.
in your national organizations as well, too. Yeah. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Saba.
you're talking, well, and just quickly to follow up on that, you're talking about Jimmy as your mentor. Barry Baltz was my mentor, also
Yes.
dragged me into IPOS, you know, hosted a conference here back in 2003. So really having that mentorship and then having that community, like both of you are saying, has been, you know, it supports you when no one seems to really get what you're going through, right?
Right.
That's true. And there is also something with IPOS that our family, professional family, our organization has such a good respect in the professional world, you know. It's such a good reference, at least in my region, in my country. Not just the fact that I became a member, which was important for me, and to learn from all of you, really all of you. But it was also that it's the 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 value of the society is really high. So it can be used as a very good reference in many places, including the projects, including your CVs, and so many other things that are very, very important all along the way, not just the beginning of the career. Speaking about advices, not too much left to say, but I will try to share two things. This one of the advices that I think it's important and it worked for me. It's don't forget to use your teaching moments. I will give you the example that I started sharing. So after I left Romania to Hungary to have a PhD in medical psycho-oncology, medical psychology, psycho-oncology, Then I returned to the same institution. I'm still working at the same institution. They're very happy, they're very supportive, and we do have a very important outreach. We have succeeded in Romania to have a national control plan a few years ago. We have a psycho-oncology law in Romania. We have trainings. We didn't have anything of this. And just use your teaching moments. So if someone says that you are not good enough and you are not right enough and you are not, you know, doing the things that you should do, that's okay. You just go on and I mean, use it as a teaching moment. I could be very easily broken. I was very young. I didn't have any kind of support. It would have been very easy just to break down and say, well, this is not for me. Maybe a priesthood, it's much more rewarding. But I was so sure about what I saw. And so I came back to the same institution. And I'm very happy that I did this. Or this was an option as well to stay in Hungary. And psycho-oncology was very much more developed than it was in Romania back then. And it would have been so easy to do this, but I came back to my institution because I had things to do in my country, in my place, and in Romania. And another thing is that it's very, very important for me, and that's a kind of advice to trust your lived experiences. Um, I just mentioned that during my free time in the beginning, I started, talking a lot with patients, hours, days, months, years. And I realized that even if the outside professional world was, thinking that it's not really important what I'm speaking about, I still was very, very sure that what I see in patients and the psychosocial burden and the psychosocial possibilities, they are real. And I really trusted that lived experience that I had with the patients and the family members. And yes, I must admit that when I started doing the research, it turned out that most of the things that I was uh, passionate about, they have been already discovered by Bill and by Jimmy in America. but nevertheless, I kept on going, and it's so interesting to see that some of my early articles that I was publishing alone, they are cited nowadays in the Arabic world and in China. And this is an indication that in many places of the world, the psycho-oncology story, it's still being written, you know. So I was so discouraged when I realized that I cannot say anything new about the prevalence of cancer distress because that's already out there, and so many other things. But then I realized that there are things that are meaningful, like the non-disclosure of the cancer diagnosis. It was in Romania sort of a national sport in between the doctors, and although it was very, very harmful to the patients, um, as a researcher, it was very interesting to um, uncover it and to understand it and to publish about it. And I will stop here, but please use your teaching moments and trust your lived experiences. And yes, I think the common advice that we are giving to you, don't give up. Really, don't give up. You can go back, you can go forward, but don't give up. If you have the magnet in you, don't do it.
I remember distinctly one of the areas of research that was most impactful that I was engaged in for about 10 years. When I first went to Dr. Holland, to Jimmy, to talk to her about it, she said, that doesn't sound like it's very important, but go ahead, knock yourself out. So it's a study of pain in HIV disease. She goes, there's no pain in AIDS. I said, yeah, there is, And it ended up being some of the most impactful work I've ever done. And meaning-centered psychotherapy, she couldn't really understand it. She didn't understand it, but she said, go ahead, knock yourself out. And then one day she walked by my office and she said, this meaning-centered stuff that you're doing, sounds like people think it's important. I go, that's interesting, Jimmy. Yeah.
Sounds like Barry with mindfulness. Could never get him to meditate a minute in his life, but he didn't have a problem with me studying it.
Thank you again for sharing some advice for us. And this, I think, is a quick moment to plug IPOS. If you're not yet a member, for early career members, it's $25 to join. And I will also say that we really want to hear from you about what you want. So the committee is here to make sure that the programming is exactly what you need, what you want. So please don't hesitate to send me or any of us a message. I can put my email in the chat. So we have about 20 minutes left. I don't want to, go beyond the hour. Everyone's busy, but I want to just ask this final question, and we can keep it brief, and then everyone can kind of ask questions if they have. So the final question is, what effective self-care practices do you recommend for those of us in this field to prevent and manage burnout and maybe grief tied to patient loss? I'm just adding that bit in at this moment.
Well, let me jump in. My first answer when I wrote is that I like to read obituaries. Obituaries are inspiring to me, and I learn about people who've lived extraordinary lives, and so that makes me feel alive. And I also get very encouraged when I see a lot of people who die at 97, 103. It's encouraging. So obituaries. The other answer in terms of is that I try not to actually separate my life and my work. I think it's an artificial separation. The word career comes from the Latin carus, which means chariot. And in fact, what a career is your life's journey. And so your life's journey involves everything in your life. And so what I try to do is I try to preserve as much, they try to, the bureaucrats who we all work with and work for in various systems, healthcare systems that we work on, they try really hard to knock all the meaning out of our work. They give us all sorts of meaningless tasks and things to do. And what I try to do is every day preserve as much of the time that I spend in doing my so-called work, it's my life's work, to be the meaningful part of what my job description is about. So I try to imbue my work with the sense of meaning and focus on and try to spend as much time doing the meaningful parts of my work, so that there really isn't this separation in my mind between work and not work, outside of work.
Yeah, I mean, I try and bring the things I like to do for self-care to the people I work with. So like I spend a lot of time in nature. I live in the mountains, and that's what brings me a sense of peace and connection and awe and everything. So I try and bring that into the types of clinical work that I do with people. And like Bill's saying, the parts of my job that I enjoy, like the writing, I really like the writing. And so I try and spend as much time as I can doing those kinds of activities. And I was just listening to a podcast today that said, the thing that makes for a happy life is having independence with how you spend your time and doing something that's meaningful. And so I think, working towards independence, like I can choose what I want to study. And if I get tired of a topic, I can pick a different topic. I can spend more time writing or more time, in administration or mentoring, and just having that flexibility and working towards that, I think gives people a sense of autonomy and control and balance.
Yes. So burnout. So one of the things I do, I have this family therapy background as well. And the first time I realized that there is something about therapy, something good, was when in family therapy they send you home, back home, not to be a participant, just to be an observer of your family ecosystem and the interactions and all these things. And what I do many times when I'm getting close to feeling burned out is that I go back to the place where I was born and I was raised up. It's a very small town, a very poor town. I'm coming from a very poor background. I was born in a neighborhood called Dallas, uh, and it was just about suffering, death, and no plans, no dreams kind of world. But it's very interesting how you can, or I could use this grounding and turning it around into kind of resilience. So when I go back there, it's very interesting what I feel. I always feel grounded. That's very interesting. I still feel at home in suffering. That's very interesting. And then I also have this distance. I am the 45-old man going back to the place of my childhood and having this distance. And this is fortifying my sense of resilience. So I really like to go back to the surroundings, to the buildings, to the places where I was born. It helps me a lot, it grounds me back, and it boosts my resilience a lot. Another thing that I find a lot of meaning in, it's I always say that I am a middle-born child and this is the story of my life, but that's really true. I was having the chance of my life to do all this kind of leadership work and working with health commissioners in Brussels and ministries and all this, important people. And I was afraid many times. I was afraid, and I was trying to discover uh, what kind of leadership do I have in me, That was not an obvious answer for me.
Mm.
I was a middle-born child. I was navigating the world really well, but I couldn't be a true leader, and I couldn't be, someone without any control or resilience. So I did discover that I am very good with shared leadership or the kind of servant leadership. It smooths me. It
Mm.
doesn't create conflicts in me. And that's such a good feeling. And that's very important because we work a lot, I work a lot. But discovering who is this middle-born child in a leadership position helped me to just be in the situation. So it helps me a lot to know my limits and to know my strengths in a situation. And it's very, very good for preventing my burnout because, yes, we work a lot. And according to the statistics, I think we are in top 3 regarding the burnout, I mean, the oncology sector. And the last thing, I'm very, very honest about this, the sense of belonging for me, it's really a great prevention factor for burnout. And as Bill said, um, uh, from IPOS, there's so many people whom I can reach out. For example, I really love Leah Bider. And I work in close contact with Lucia Travados. So, but there's so many other really great people. So for me, the sense of belonging is a good prevention for burnout. And how can you do this? These webinars are great, and it's such a nice feeling to have all the young professionals from all over the world. But frankly, our conference is where I get a lot of resources for a year, half a year, and so on. But personally, what I do is this. I go back and I try to get my distance and my resilience. And also, as you will discover, as your career will grow, you will discover there is always a next step. And maybe you are not so afraid of the outside world as I am, but even if you are so, don't forget that you have limits, but you have strengths. And I'm so happy to be a middle-born child. Actually, it helps me a lot in the oncopolicy work that I do.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left. I think we'll have some time for a few questions. Maybe we have one person answer per question so we can get through a decent number if that sounds all right. Anyone have a question? Yeah, go ahead,
Yes.
Lara.
Yeah, thanks again. I think I speak for all of us. You're pioneers, your role models. Without you and your colleagues' efforts, we wouldn't talk about this as a field or even pursuing a career in it. I was wondering, do you have any ideas what we as a committee or even IPOS could do to keep young or early careers involved, to connect them or even to empower them, especially in those moments where it's easy to give up?
Well, I don't know if you want us to answer that or if the committee should talk about it, but some schemes that have worked I've seen is like setting up mentoring programs within an early career kind of committee, like either peer mentoring, so you have sort of a one-on-one connection with a buddy that you can meet with on a regular basis, or even more formally connecting the early career people with sort of volunteer, more senior people that, again, they can meet with on a more regular basis. That can sometimes be really helpful, but I'm sure the leaders of this committee have lots of other ideas too.
Yeah, I also think that there really need to be more young psycho-oncologists in positions of governance. They don't necessarily have to, the board of directors doesn't have to be a particular. It could be much larger, and you can have as many young. Usually you have to be highly accomplished, whatever. I think, is there one position for a young professor right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think even how many board of directors do we have now?
I don't, a fair
10?
number, but
10. I think you add as many I think you add as many young investigators, from each region and stuff like that.
Thank you. Okay, Sam, you're up.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Or...
Yep.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate you sharing your stories. I was wondering, to what extent do you find that children and adolescents are able to really explore meaning and purpose in their lives, especially those that are battling cancer? And then my other question, if you're able to answer too, is how transferable do you think the skills are in psycho-oncology to other fields, and what might those other fields be that you think they're most transferable to?
Yeah, I can answer the second question. Bill can answer the first one, probably.
I can answer the second one too. Real estate, real estate agent. selling real estate. Yeah. But go ahead, Linda, you can answer the second.
Well, I mean, anything in behavioral medicine, right? So it's a behavioral, it depends if you're doing intervention work, like what kinds of research you're specializing in, but I cross lots of fields. And so I go to Society for Behavioral Medicine meetings. I do training on, again, sort of health psychology, behavioral medicine platforms. And I'm also live in the world of integrative medicine as well, which is looking at all the different complementary therapies. But I think just in general, theories around behavior change are really very necessary, for things like getting people to eat a healthy diet, exercise, and, so that's all kind of bordering on psycho-oncology, but much more addressing mainstream problems like people who have, prediabetes and like all kinds of other sort of health conditions. They need to learn techniques of behavior change that in many ways we can be well suited and well trained to sort of help with that kind of thing.
I think your answer to the response to your question about the adolescents and children, and could you repeat it, Sam?
So the question was, to what extent do you find that children and adolescents are able to really explore questions
Meaning.
of meaning and purpose.
Yeah, it's we've adapted meaning-centered psychotherapy for adolescents and young adults, and obviously, like many things in dealing with children and adolescents, it's a lot is dependent on the developmental age of that child or adolescent, and in the formal trials that are going on now, we're focused on meaning-centered psychotherapy for starting with adolescents who are like 14 and adolescents, 14 and older. I would say probably from the time you're bar mitzvah, 13, you probably can start to explore meaning. I mean, if you know what I'm saying? I mean, but I suspect the age might be, a lot of it has to do with that age, the age, several hundred years ago, Kierkegaard taught us that human beings were unique in terms of all forms of life, and that we're unique in that we're the only animals that are capable of becoming aware of our own existence. We can objectively contemplate ourselves. And so I think it's that age when you become aware that I exist and you're overcome with this existential obligation of responsibility. What is my ability to respond to being alive? And you start that process of, I'm here now. Who do I become? I recently watched on YouTube an interview with Carl Jung, and the interviewer asked him, Professor, at what age did you realize you first existed? And he actually didn't stop. He didn't hesitate. He said, I was 11 years old. I was 11 years old, and suddenly I found myself in a field. And I realized I exist. Before this, I was in a mist, not individuated. But suddenly, here I am at age 11. So I think maybe Carl Jung could have done it at 11. So there might even be 11-year-olds who could meaningfully do that. But they would have to be Swiss or Viennese.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We have a few more moments before we have to wrap up. That was a great impression.
Good impression.
Just getting back to the question of Lara. I think, Lara, the good ways for you is to find a mentor here in our IPOS community. That's a really nice way to do it. If you don't have one, well, go for it, because this is one of the answers that probably you are looking for. And for Sam, I just want to say that I can see the power of teenage young adult cancer survivors here in Brussels as well. So they do know how to turn their experience into meaning, into advocacy, and even in politics. So they're very strong. Actually, they're the strongest in the onco field here in Brussels.
Yeah, very interesting. Someone from Texas wanted to ask a question.
Yes. Thank you all for this wonderful insight. I'm Dr. Girish Lad. I represent an organization called Texas School of Mental Health. And we have recently started a program in Psycho-Oncology, a postgraduate diploma in Psycho-Oncology. So we started this as a pilot in India, and we have around 2 batches with total comprising 50 students. Now, the first experience that I have of conducting a training programs in Psycho-Oncology is that the most of the students who are participating in this program are having some or the other acquaintance with the cancer. And those who do not have any kind of experience, they find it that it is one of the branch of psychology. Like parenting can be the one of the specialization, or becoming a specialized in REBT. So the challenge is how to differentiate, how to create an awareness amongst the oncologists and also amongst the psychologists that psycho-oncology is not just a single therapeutic approach, but it's a big and a super specialty subject.
You give them a copy of Psycho-Oncology, 4th edition,
It's
edited
big.
by yeah, very big. It's
It's very heavy.
right over there, and 110 chapters of everything you ever want to know about psycho-oncology, published by Oxford University Press and sponsored by IPOS and APOS.
And I
And
suppose
the journal,
I was just going to
Psycho-Oncology.
say, I suppose I should plug the journal too. So it's open access. Anybody can download all the papers, even all the abstracts from the conference. So it's Journal of Psychosocial Oncology Research and Practice, and that's IPOS's official journal. And as I said, it's all open access, and there's discounted article processing fees for IPOS members. So we do encourage people to submit their work to our journal, but more than anything, read it because it covers all different aspects of psycho-oncology research and clinical care.
Yeah, and you should have them read Harvey Chachnov's seminal papers on
Dignity.
essays
Yeah.
on dignity, personhood, and the platinum rule.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, that's about time. Thank you so much for everyone who's joined, to our experts in the field. I think this was just such a wonderful conversation. So thank you very, very much.
Good to see such an
Thanks for
international
organizing.
audience. Yeah, thanks for organizing.
That's true.
Thanks, everyone.
Care.